Okay, welcome to JC Connect. In the previous class, we were discussing about some of the solids experiment, and meanwhile, we have completed the hardness experiment. We have completed the turbidity. We have completed the pH as well. Okay, so the solids we are going to classify into um, three or four ways. So this is first one, that is uh, the settlable solids. So that is settlable solids. So that is then TSS, so then TDS and total colloidal solids. So settlable solids we already covered. Settlable solids we already covered how to conduct it experiment. So using the Imhoff-Kohn test, um, we have mm, to conduct the experiment. Okay, so under the influence of the gravity, it is going to settle here, and it is measured with the help of ml per liter. Measured with the help of ml per liter. Then we also covered total suspended solids. So with this, we have to consider on filter paper. So then we have to um, filter using a known volume of the solids containing the water, that is we have taken 100 ml. So then we have filtered it. Then after filtration process, you have to oven dry it in 24 hours at 105 degrees centigrade. So now after oven drying, so initial weight of the empty filter paper and final weight of the after oven drying, so the difference of that it will give that much grams in 100 ml. So always you have to use G, then 100 ml. Then if you want to convert this into 1 liters, that is for 1000 ml, 1000 ml. So multiply by, so 10. Multiply by 10 means you will get it for, so whichever it is in liter, gram per liter. That you convert it into milligram per liter. So the unit of the TSS, that is total suspended solids, it is nothing but milligram per liter. So whichever the solids are retained on the filter paper, that is total suspended solids. So then total dissolved solids and total colloidal solids. See, some of the solids I said, see, whenever you are filtering through the filter paper, and this one is nothing but it is ashless filter paper. Okay, even if you burnt it, you won't get any ash. Okay, so ashless filter paper that you have to use it. So that brand, it is nothing but Vatman 42 filter paper you have to use. Vatman filter paper 42 filter paper you have to use it. See, I said once you filtered it, some of the solids will filter through this filter paper. So it is having, the filter paper is having pores. So through these pores, some of the solids will pass through this, and it will be collected in one glass beaker. Collected in glass beaker. Okay. Then again, this you have to oven dry it. Oven dry it for about 24 hours at 105 degrees centigrade. So automatically all the water which is 100 ml of which is collected in this, it is going to evaporate. So it is going to evaporate. It is going to evaporate. So once it is going to evaporate, so at the bottom you can see some of the white precipitate type solids. You can see that is nothing but total dissolved solids. See, total dissolved solids are going to escape through this filter paper. Okay, and total suspended solids will retain on this filter paper. That only you have to remember. And this total colloidal solids, always it is measured in terms of turbidity. Remember, we already covered turbidity experiment, and this is going to be determined with the help of the turbidity experiment. Okay. Sometimes what will happen is that there are some other methods are there to find out these colloidal solids, because these colloidal particles are charged particles. It's very difficult to find out. So using different filtration methods are there. With the help of that, we are going to determine it. And even total dissolved solids, it is having the unit of milligram per liter. It is having the unit of milligram per liter. So yeah, when you are conducting the total dissolved solids, again you have to, before collecting the sample from this 100 ml, this one, take the empty weight of this, empty weight of the beaker where you are collecting it. Then after 24 hours after own drying, again if you take the final weight, the difference of that two will give you the um, total dissolved solids. Then we have discussed total fixed solids also, total fixed solids and total volatile solids. See, if you want to calculate total fixed solids and total volatile solids, see what you have to do is that, see for total fixed solids, see we already collected some of the total suspended solids, TSS onto the filter paper. Okay, you already collected it and you all measured it. So then what you have to do is that this, whatever the collected um, total suspended solids, you have to burn that whole in crucible. Crucible will be of this shape. Okay, so whatever the filter paper is, you have to fold it and you have to keep it inside here, and you have to burn it. You have to burn that. Okay, and this crucible, of course, it is made up of um, mm, mm, silica, made up of silica. Okay, even this crucible withstand up to 1000 to 1200 degree centigrade. Okay, even if you burn it in um, even for about 1000 it will not break. Okay, it will not break. Hmm. So then you have to burn it. So before burning, take the empty weight of this crucible. Okay, so then you burn it. See, after burning, some of the solids, because this whatever the filter paper of course is ashless, you won't get any ash, only some of the solids will retain here in this crucible. You can see that some of the solids are going to retain in this crucible. Okay, and some of the solids during burning process will escape. Okay, those solids will escape, they are all total volatile solids, and those solids will retain here in the crucible, they are total fixed solids. Okay, those solids will escape, they are total volatile solids. Those solids will fix at the bottom, they are total fixed solids. Okay, so now in overall classifications, what we can do is that total suspended solids, total fixed solids, total dissolved solids, total colloidal solids. Of course, this one it's very difficult to perform in the laboratory, so it requires specialized this one equipments and thousands. So we'll neglect this, but you assume that total colloidal solids also it will be there, and total suspended solids. Okay, so except settleable solids, the unit of all these things are milligram per liter. Okay, so this is overall about the solids experiment. Okay, so next the iron, it is also a very important component in our um, laboratory process. So iron generally exists in natural water, both in ferric as well as the ferrous forms. The form of iron, however, may be altered as a result of oxidation or reduction, or due to growth of the bacteria. Okay, so it exists in both Fe2 plus as well as Fe3 3 plus. Sometimes you may get Fe0 also. So this one we can call it as a zero valence iron. Okay. So this one Fe2 plus is always ferrous, and this one is also ferric form. Okay. See, sometimes Fe2 plus is going to convert Fe3 plus, Fe3 plus is going to convert Fe2 plus. So these are nothing but oxidation and reduction process. Oxidation and reduction process. So oxidation means the loss of electrons, reduction means gain of electrons. Okay, if Fe2 plus is going to convert Fe3 plus, Fe2 plus is going to convert Fe3 plus, so that is nothing but the oxidation process. Okay, so by losing one electron, say Fe3 plus is going to convert to Fe plus, the reverse is the reduction process. That you have to remember. Okay, why the iron in water is very important? Because iron play a very important role in our human health also. See, what will happen is that normally, if iron deficiency is there in our body, so the HB, the hemoglobin content, okay, is going to be reduced. As for our uh, the ICMR norms, Indian Council for Medical Research, so ICMR norms. So in body, the hemoglobin content should be, it is 10, it is required. So normally, if it is going to below 10, so then normally they will go for the iron. Sometimes they will give iron tablets to improve. Okay, suppose if it is goes below 8, suppose if it is going below hemoglobin in blood, what we are talking about. Okay, so if it is goes below 8, then they will go for, the doctors will go for iron injections. Iron injections. So if your iron is, if it is going through the water, drinking water, so that is also good, but it should not be more also. Okay, that is why what the IS 10,500 in 2012, see what it will say is that it is zero point 0.3 milligram per liter is the maximum permissible limit in the drinking water. Okay, so if it is goes below, or if it is more above 0.3, then you have to reduce the iron content. So normally some of the lateritic soil or lateritic basins will be there, so you can find in surface water as well as in the groundwater, so iron content will be more. And most of the time in groundwater also, groundwater in some of the, if you go to um, the Mangalore belt and all those things, their lateritic basin is there. So you can find up to 3 milligram per liter, up to 3 milligram per liter in that belt. So you have to reduce it. Okay. So more iron is also, sometimes it is very dangerous for your intestine. Okay. Even if it is less, it is definitely going to affect your blood hemoglobin. So this is overall significance of the water for as the human health is concerned. Suppose when it is other things, so if you are mud water, if you are mixing it for concrete purpose, it is very dangerous. Okay, see some of the corrosion aspects, it is going to problem, and also the iron bacteria, it is going to play a major role in the concrete. See, many research is going on whether this iron bacteria is really helping the concrete or not. Okay, this iron bacteria, because iron, the whatever the oxidation or reduction process or which is going to happen, sometimes it is due to the iron bacteria itself, whether it is really helping the concrete or not. So that many things are going on, but most of the time if mud water is there, it is normally it is not suitable for the concrete mixing purpose. And in boilers and all those things, if you are using it, you should be very careful, because iron acts uh, as an very important parameters. When iron, whatever the Fe, if it is going to mix with oxygen, so it is forms Fe2O3, then oxides. Oxides are nothing but, we can say it is corrosion. It is nothing but the corrosion. Always this corrosion property that we have to always think it of. Corrosion is always dangerous. Okay. So iron oxide is nothing but it is the corrosion process only. Okay. Then presence of iron in water is not okay. The tolerance limit is 1 milligram per liter. So iron can easily determined by colorimetric method. Okay, two methods are there to determine the. See, sometimes they say that it is not harmful for health, but too much of iron is also very dangerous. Remember that too much of iron is also very dangerous. We can say it is not harmful, but still, if it goes beyond 6 or 7, it is dangerous to the human health. So make a note of that. Okay. Then how exactly we are going to determine the iron in water? So we are using colorimetric method, using a KCN method. Okay, potassium thiocyanate method. Okay, we are developing a color. um a series of vials will take the Nestler's reagents, like 6 reagents will take, and we will add the first um, uh, 0.1 milligram per liter, zero point 0.2, zero point 0.3 milligram per liter, zero point 0.4, zero point 0.5, and one is blank. Blank means distilled water. You are not adding anything. The last one. Okay. So standard iron solutions we are adding, and we are developing the color. So normally the color will get the red color. Okay. Then what we'll do is that once the color is developed, as the concentration is increasing from 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, as the concentration is increasing from left to right, um, even the color is also going to increase. Okay. So this was a little bit lighter color, then this is darker, it is still darker, and from left to right, you can see the increasing color of the uh, uh, standard solutions. Then what you have to do is that then unknown solutions you have to take. Unknown means if you want to determine it, we don't know how much it is there. For this also you have to develop the color. Develop the color. See how, what is the procedure? What exactly the procedure we are using it here? The zero point 0.1 milligram per liter of iron solution, 0.2 milligram, 0.3 milligram per liter, zero point 0.4 milligram per liter, 0.5 milligram per liter, and this is we are not adding any reagents, only just distilled water. Okay, we have to make it 100 ml. Okay, that calculation is that we have to do it. Of course, we will not discuss in detail. So for all these things we are adding it. Okay, reagents. Once you add the iron solution, for all the things you have to add 5 ml of 5 ml of this KCN reagent. Okay, KCN reagents to for all 5 ml this one, 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 and make it up to 100 ml using distilled water. So now we will get the increasing color from left to right. For this also unknown sample. So the sample water you have to consider. For example, in the ground surface water. For example, surface water, if you are using it, take one more Nestler's tube. We can call it as Nestler's tube. Okay. For this, what you have to do is that you have to add. You have to add uh, the whatever the surface water you have collected up to some 90 ml. 90 ml you have to add. Then you have to add for this 5 ml KCN also. You have to add 5 ml KCN solution, that is potassium thiocyanate. So then make it up to 100 ml using the same surface water only. Then it is going to develop some color. Develop some color. It is going to develop some color. Okay. Then what you have to do is, once this unknown sample is going to develop color, then you have to compare with all these 5, point 1, point 2, point 3. So then which color it is matching? Either it is matching with 0.2 milligram per liter, or whether it is matching with 0.3 milligram per liter, either it is matching with 0.4 milligram per liter, either it is matching with a 0.5 milligram per liter. So that you have to check it out. So if it is matching, if this unknown sample, if it is matching with 0.1 milligram per liter, so then it is the unknown sample iron concentration is zero point 0.1 milligram per liter. So if it is matching with 0.2 milligram per liter, then unknown sample iron concentration is 0.2 milligram per liter. Suppose the color is in between 0.2 and 0.1. So then you can say average, you can say it is 0.15 milligram per liter. That is how you are going to determine the iron in unknown sample. Okay. And one more spectrophotometric method is there, using UV visible spectrophotometer. So that is also main, the color development, the similar process you have to do it, color development method. Once the color development method is over, so then you have to using UV visible spectrophotometer. So there you will get exactly accurate. Okay, like if you want 0.11, so if it is 0.13, 0.12, so like that exactly you will get there in spectrophotometer. Suppose if you want approximations, so you can go for the colorimetric method. Okay. So sometimes in pipelines, and if it is more is there, definitely it is going to impart a bad color as bad odor to a drinking water. That is why if any odor or if any taste it is giving, so definitely the water will be rejected. So I said that too much of iron is not suitable for drinking means, because it is going to develop, or it is going to uh, uh, give a bad smell or bad odor based on our standards. As per our standards IS 10500 2012, what it will say is that if odor is there, if taste is there, directly we can reject it. Okay. So then this of course I already explained this iron, how exactly um, the we are going to measure. So the ferric iron, which is going to the thiocyanate ions, that is KCN, to form red color ferric thiocyanate, which is measured colorimetrically at 510 nanometers. Okay, using spectrophotometers. Okay, then sulfates. We'll move on to the sulfates. Sulfates also, it is an very important components. We does not require more sulfates in water, so we need very less. So we need only um, 45 milligram per liter of sulfates is required. Okay, it does not require more. So sulfates occurs naturally in water as a result of leaching from gypsum and other common minerals. So in addition to the sulfate may be added to the water system in several water treatment process also. Okay, sometimes the hydrochloric acid will add it to neutralize the, or to reduce the pH. So in that way also it will include. Okay. So then uh, contaminated waters and wastewaters normally having high sulfate concentration, so that increased sulfate in drinking water normally point to a influence of the wastewater. Sometimes uh, some of the industries, if they are discharging their wastewater to an surface water body as well as the groundwater, so definitely it is going to affect the water body. Then sulfate content in natural water is an very important concentrations uh, in their suitability for public and industrial water supplies. So knowledge of this uh, sulfate content of the sludge as well as the um, waste feed in digestion units is very important. So of course we'll not go in detail. What we can do is that, so sulfates is very important component. So in drinking water, drinking water, drinking water, up to 45 milligram per is required. Okay, and it is through the wastewater only. If it is the source, if it is from the wastewater only. If it is municipal wastewater, municipal means municipal wastewater from your latrines. If it is joining to a surface water body, so definitely um, the sulfate is going to enter into surface water, because your whatever the human feces, it consists of the NO3, it consists of SO4, nitrates and sulfates. Okay, even through the agriculture fertilizers, if you are using more, see during runoff, what will happen is that, because we'll use uh, sulfates as a nutrients for plant growth, and you'll use the DAP, that is diammonium phosphates. Phosphates also will get it. So diammonium means, ammonia means NH3. Again, when it comes to NH3, it is also nitrates. So it is nitrogen. Okay. So through this also, during runoff, agriculture runoff, so normally it will enter to a surface water body during rainfall. So then you will get the this as well as sulfates, nitrates, even through the municipal wastewater, we are getting the sulfates. Through the agriculture runoff from the fertilizers, we are getting the through the we are getting to a surface water body. Suppose if you want to reduce the sulfate concentration in water, so you have to go for the best agriculture practices, so that the residue which remains in the soil, okay, should not be come out from the agricultural land. So that systematic plan has to be done, and this is one major research area also, as you're already in fourth semester. Okay, how the nutrient value can be protected in the agriculture field itself, because once you protected the nutrients in the soil itself, okay, assume that, so you have the agricultural land is there. So normally you will use many fertilizers as well as the pesticides. Okay. Most of the time, what will happen is that if heavy rainfall has happened, definitely um, the flood, we can see the flood. During the flood, the nutrients will definitely come out from the agricultural land, and definitely it will receive the surface water body. Why? Because surface water body or the rivers always at the lower locations, and your agriculture field is at the always at the higher locations. The tendency is always towards the lower locations. Okay, so how to protect this nutrient value? Okay, that's a tremendous researches going on, and even you can um, do some of these small projects also, how the nutrient value can be protected in the agriculture land. So once you protect or once you stop movement of this nutrients from agriculture land, so 70 to 80% of the water pollution due to this sulfates, nitrates, as well as the phosphates can be protected. And one more that is dangerous, that is related to the pesticides. Okay, I'll take one separate class related to the pesticide movement in the soil as well as the in the water. See, when it is comparing with the sulfates, nitrates, and the phosphates, comparing with the pesticides, pesticides are more dangerous. Okay. See, even if it is there 45 milligram per liter or 20 milligram per liter of, if sulfates are there in a drinking water, it does not cause any bad effects on human health. But the same concentration, if it is a 45 milligram per liter or if it is 20 milligram per liter of pesticides are there in uh, drinking water, means it is definitely it is going to kill the humans, definitely, because we'll discuss that it in a separate class. How exactly the toxic effect of this pesticides versus the nutrients? Sometimes nutrients with a 45 milligram per liter is okay, but 45 milligram per liter of pesticides, Even if you take one drop, you're going to die. Okay, because its toxic level of pesticides is in terms of nanogram per liters. Okay, it is in terms of microgram per liter. Just compare with the milligram per liter and microgram per liter. Okay, so we'll discuss that in the one more separate class. Okay, then sulfates, um, as well as our the nitrates, they are very dangerous if it is in excess concentrations. Okay, so even concrete also, this sulfate attack and not the is very dangerous. Even sulfate in concrete mixing water, it should not exceed. If it is going to exceed 80 milligram per liter, we are not supposed to use it because the scale formation is going to happen. Okay, and the method of determination of sulfate is, of course, with the help of the spectrophotometer. We are using the spectrophotometer to determine the sulfates in drinking water. Then the nitrogen, the nitrogen, um, we will discuss possibly in the next class. Before that, um, the forms of nitrogen. The forms of nitrogen are, okay. One is nitrate, nitrate, then ammonia and organic nitrogen. See, uh, waters as well as in the wastewaters. See, these four forms you can expect. Okay, so it is NO2, NO2, NO3, then NH3, then carbon N, that is CN. Okay, if C along with the N is there, that we can call it as organic nitrogen. Organic nitrogen. Okay. If C is not there, these are all inorganic. That is the basic classification. Okay, all these forms of nitrogen as well as the nitrogen gas are biomolecularly interconvertible and are the components of nitrogen cycle. You might be knowing nitrogen cycle, how nitrate is going to make a nitrate, nitrate is going to nitrate using say nitrosomonas bacteria. Okay, nitrifying bacteria and denitrifying bacteria. Nitrifying bacteria and denitrifying denitrifying bacteria. These two bacteria are responsible from conversion from nitrate to nitrate, and ammonia nitrogens. Okay. Suppose if nitrogen is there along with the carbon, not normal, you can call it as a organic nitrogen. See, these nitrogen components are also very dangerous as compared if they are in excess. Suppose if it is in with a limit, okay, 10 milligram per liter, 20 milligram, it is not that much dangerous. Okay, so all these forms of nitrogen, because it takes more than half an hour. Okay, how exactly the general nitrogen, what are the components, okay, and how exactly it will be determined, which forms of nitrogen is more dangerous, so that normally we'll discuss in the next class. Okay, if you have any doubts you can ask.